Welcome to Faith Uncovered. Imagine that the story of Jesus might not have kicked off in a humble Galilean village, but rather on the bustling streets of Rome as a satirical street play. It's a pretty wild notion, right?
So are we saying, like, the Gospel of Mark wasn't exactly a straightforward account, but more like performance art aimed at a Roman audience?
Exactly. The idea here is that Mark might have been crafted as a theatrical passion play, full of abrupt scene changes, symbolic actions, and a kind of dramatic irony intended for Gentile spectators. It really turns our assumptions upside down.
That's fascinating. It almost sounds like the narrative was designed to be a sort of political commentary rather than just a historical record.
Right, and scholars like James Tabor point out that Mark has this performance vibe with its rapid shifts in scenes and its over-the-top dramatics. It's like, you know, a stage production rather than a documentary.
And then you've got Joseph Atwill, who dives even deeper with what he calls the Flavian signature. He argues that Jesus' route in Mark mirrors the military campaign of Titus, stops like Gadara and even Jerusalem, with a heavy dose of satire aimed at Jewish resistance. That's pretty daring.
Exactly. It's like, well, you have this narrative structure that mimics the real-life military movements of the Roman forces after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 CE. The timing is crucial, too, as it was written in the aftermath when Roman authors were reconfiguring Jewish history for an elite Gentile audience. It's a clever reworking.
Yeah. So essentially, the gospel transforms into a stage play where political satire and historical events blend. Is that the whole picture?
Pretty much. And it gets even more interesting when you consider how this theatrical Jesus gets taken up by Gnostic sects, groups like the Scythians, Valentinians, and Basilidians operating in places like Alexandria and Syria. Instead of focusing on literal miracles, they dove into the enigmatic aspects of his origins. They were all about inner knowledge, gnosis.
Right. Elaine Pagels even showed that for the Gnostics, it wasn't about whether Jesus walked on water, but about which aeon or spiritual realm he came from. It gives a whole new dimension to his character.
Exactly. His mysterious, almost ambiguous nature in Mark served as the perfect foundation for these expansive cosmologies. It's like a blank canvas for projecting deeper mythic meanings rather than just recounting historical events. It fits in nicely with Gnostic thought.
And then there's Marcion of Sinope, who takes this Gentile-friendly, anti-Jewish version of Jesus and really runs with it by editing or even possibly commissioning texts to support his theology. Correct?
Absolutely. Marcion, active around 140 CE, is often seen as the first major editor, or dare I say publisher, of these texts. He curated versions of the gospel, maybe even reworked or stripped them of overt Jewish elements, and paired them with what we now consider Pauline epistles. It's a fascinating reordering of the narrative.
That essentially flips the traditional chronology. Instead of Paul preceding the gospel tradition, we might be looking at a scenario where Paul's letters and even his theological voice were later products, shaped specifically to bolster Marcion's reimagined Christianity.
Exactly. And that disruption forced the early church, the so-called Catholic faction, to fight back hard. Think of figures like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Tertullian, each of whom launched a literary counter-campaign to repudiate Marcion's version.
Yeah.
They essentially tried to reclaim the narrative.
So the early church ended up creating and editing texts like Acts, as well as inserting orthodox interpolations into Pauline letters in order to domesticate these radical ideas and solidify what they claimed was apostolic truth. It's sort of like a power struggle fought with words and texts, right?
Precisely. It's a tug of war between controlling the story and directing the unfolding of doctrine. The narrative was manipulated on both sides, whether as a kind of performance art in Mark or, later, as part of the battle for canonical authority by figures like Marcion and the Orthodox defenders. The stakes were high.
Now, don't you think that sometimes this interpretation might be a bit too stretched? I mean, reading a street play into the gospel narrative sounds, well, provocative, but maybe overinterpreted.
That's a valid challenge. Not every scholar buys into the performance angle fully. For example, while Atwill's Flavian signature provides striking parallels, others like Richard Carrier acknowledge some literary similarities without fully endorsing the notion that the gospel was primarily a stage performance.
Yeah.
It's definitely a debate with no simple answers.
It's a balancing act, right? On one hand, we have the exciting idea that these texts were crafted with deliberate theatrical nuances. And on the other, we have a more conservative view that insists on a historical core untouched by later editorial theatrics.
Exactly, and that balance is what fuels ongoing scholarly discussion. It's a reminder that these ancient texts can be seen both as political artifacts and, well, as cultural performances. The layering of symbolism, satire, and genuine historical events intertwines in a really intriguing way. A real multidimensional puzzle.
It's like the narrative of Christianity ends up being a dynamic interplay of myth, politics, and performance art, creating room for multiple interpretations. Doesn't it almost elevate the story into a kind of epic dramatic saga?
Yes, exactly. It's like you're watching an ancient live broadcast, a performance meant to evoke strong emotional and political reactions among its audience. The transformation from a street performance to a foundational religious narrative is, well, quite dramatic. Definitely epic.
And all these layers, from a Roman street play to Gnostic rereadings to Marcion's editorial overhaul, really compel us to rethink the origins of Christianity, don't they?
Absolutely. It suggests that what we thought was a straightforward historical transformation is really a rich tapestry of cultural and political influences. And it forces us to ask, could the greatest story ever told have been born out of a performance designed for the Roman stage?
That's a pretty mind-bending possibility. The idea that the narrative was crafted to, resonate with a politically sophisticated Gentile audience rather than a primarily Jewish one really shifts the way we can view these texts.
Right? And that ties back to the discussions about how early Christian texts emerged out of intense debates and conflicts over authority between Marcion's movement and the emerging Catholic Church, which sought to define orthodoxy. It's a fierce literary battle.
And it makes you wonder how much of what we now revere as sacred literature was intentionally shaped by political needs of the time. The interplay of art and authority is really striking here.
Exactly. And it shows that sacred texts can have multiple lives. One as a performance meant to entertain or persuade in a specific historical context, and another as a source of spiritual guidance, reinterpreted by successive generations. It's like layers upon layers of storytelling.
But then, where do we draw the line between historical truth and artistic license? Is it possible that emphasizing the theatrical elements diverts attention from genuine religious experiences at the time?
That's a compelling critique. While the theatrical theory is seductive, offering a refreshing take on how narratives are crafted, it does risk overlooking the sincere spiritual fervor that many believers must have felt. Yet, even if one accepts that there are strong artistic elements, it doesn't negate the transformative impact these texts had. There's room for both interpretations.
So, it seems like, in a way, the debate becomes about acknowledging the tension between literary innovation and historical authenticity. And both might have played roles in how early Christianity evolved.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating is that exploring these alternative theories pushes us to revisit our assumptions about ancient history and the formation of religious traditions. It's a reminder that stories, no matter how old, are often as much about the time they were told as the time they describe.
Yeah.
It's really eye-opening.
It certainly is. And as we peel back the layers, from the Roman street play aspects to the Gnostic reinterpretations and the fierce reactions of the early Orthodox Church, we start to see a far more complex picture than a simple, linear historical account.
Exactly. It's like, well, every performance has multiple acts, and this one has more twists than a modern-day thriller. It's a brilliant mix of satire, politics, and spirituality, all wrapped into one. It's an epic narrative in its own right.
And it definitely invites us to ask whether our current understanding of Christianity might be, at least in part, a story that's been re-edited over centuries, reflecting the concerns and power struggles of different eras.
Right on. Even if you don't fully embrace the idea of Mark as a Roman street play, the very debate pushes us to appreciate how texts evolve and gain layers of meaning over time. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems.
It's like a reminder that history is not just a static record. It's a living dialogue between the past and the present, complete with artistic flourishes and high-stakes political drama.
Precisely. And as we continue to examine these alternative narratives, we're encouraged to look at sacred texts not as monolithic truths, but as dynamic canvases painted by many hands. This approach doesn't diminish their value. It enriches our understanding of how belief and power interact. Absolutely enriching.
Well, this conversation has really broadened my perspective on the origins of Christianity. It's like a compelling blend of art, history, and politics that challenges traditional views in an exciting way.
Definitely. Whether you lean towards the idea of a staged performance or maintain a more orthodox reading of the texts, these discussions open up critical questions about the nature of narrative, belief, and authority. It really makes you think.
And that's what great debates do. They force us to re-examine our established assumptions and to think deeper about the stories that shape our culture. I'm definitely left pondering where the line is between performance and proclamation.
Exactly, and it's that very ambiguity that sparks ongoing scholarly inquiry, whether it's the dramatic flair of the Flavian signature or the layered reinterpretations by Gnostic sects and Marcion. We're reminded that history can be as theatrical as it is factual. Truly fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. It seems like every time we peel back one layer, another intriguing question emerges. Like, could the greatest story ever told have, in its earliest moments, been born out of a performance meant to captivate a Roman crowd?
Precisely. And that possibility not only redefines our view of early Christian texts, but also underscores how narratives, over time, are reshaped to serve contemporary needs and ideologies. It's a testament to the power of storytelling.
Well, it's been a really engaging deep dive into this alternative perspective. Thanks for such an insightful discussion. I'm definitely going to be rethinking these texts from a fresh angle.
Thanks, too. It's been a great exploration of just how intertwined art, politics, and faith can be. Keep questioning and stay curious as you unravel these layers of history.
Absolutely. Until next time, let's keep seeking the stories behind the stories. Thanks for joining me, and see you soon.